Hey guys, Tyler Berger here with Bass Fishing HQ, and today I want to talk about the two biggest misconceptions that you hear about fall time bass fishing, so stay tuned, it's gonna be a good one. As always, this video is brought to you by the Bass Hat, this hat that I'm wearing right now. It comes with a wooden bass badge on the top, and it's not just any wood, it's actually made out of old bourbon barrels. It's a really unique hat, and if you guys want to help support the Bass Fishing HQ channel, you can actually click the link below and pick up one of these awesome hats. Fall time bass fishing. A lot of us love the fall time for a number of different reasons. A lot of us hate the fall time for a lot of different reasons as well. One of the things that I love about it is that, you know, there's a lot of anglers that are in the woods hunting this time of the year, so you tend to have a lot of the water to yourself, which is just something that I absolutely love. I don't like to be out there with a million other guys fishing, and less pressured fish tend to be easier fish to catch. But with that being said, there's something that you hear a lot in bass fishing. There's two phrases you hear a lot, and they're definitely associated with finding bass during the fall. What actually kind of made me think about this, I was clearing off my old computer a few days ago, and I actually found some footage of when I wanted to do YouTube about 8 or 9 years ago. It's really terrible, but I was listening to some of it, and I actually talk about fall fishing in this one clip, and I want to actually take you guys back in time real quick to me about 8 or 9 years ago when I was going to try to do YouTube.
One of the biggest things that you really want to look for in the fall is bait fish. You really want to be able to find bait in the creek arm that you're looking for. Now, just because you find bait doesn't always mean there's going to be bass there, but when there are bass in an area, there's always bait.
So I really want to talk about bait fish when it comes to fall fishing, but before I talk about that video I showed you, I never posted any of that stuff, and that was from like 8 or 9 years ago when I wanted to start doing YouTube, and I never started doing anything really with YouTube until last year when I really started to kind of focus on it. So real quick side note, if you guys ever just think you can start that business or start a YouTube channel or whatever it may be, just do it. Just go with it, because I really wish that I would have put a big focus on YouTube back then instead of now. And I feel like it's just better to live life without those type of regrets. So anyways, back to fall fishing. In that video, I talked about how I always look for bait fish, because typically when you find bass, there's bait fish close by. But the big thing that I said there was, just because you find bait fish doesn't always mean that there's going to be bass close by. And I really want you guys to really kind of engrave this in your mind, because I think that a lot of us think that bait fish equals bass. I feel like anytime you look up anything on the computer, on YouTube, anywhere, when it comes to fall bass fishing, you're gonna find the bait and you're gonna find the bass. Now, here's the thing. Like I said, when you do find the bass, there's typically bait fish in the area. So that part of it does make sense. But what happens a lot of times is you may be a bank angler, or you may be newer to bass fishing. You may be an old veteran bass fisherman, and you get into a pocket on the lake and there's bait fish everywhere. They're flicking all over the place. You're like, I'm gonna catch them. I'm gonna maul the bass here. And the thing is you don't. You know, you're throwing all the right baits. You're throwing buzz baits, spinner baits, crank baits, whatever it may be. You're throwing the right stuff. You're around bait fish, but you're not catching bass. And it's so frustrating. But something that you really have to take into consideration during the fall is that there is really bait fish almost everywhere during the fall. You have bait fish like threadfin shad and gizzard shad that have laid eggs kind of in that April, May, June time frame, and now they've hatched, and that young of the year shad are an inch and a half, and they are everywhere during this time of the year. They are everywhere. They're in deep water, shallow water, backs of pockets, on points. They're all over the place. And so what really can be frustrating as a bass fisherman is you going out there, finding bait, seeing shad flick all across the surface, literally balls of shad hitting up against your boat, but you're not catching any bass. And it's really, really frustrating. So one thing that I really like to do in this case and during the fall is really pay closer attention to the right sized bait fish. So something that I've seen is, you know, for instance, I was on Lake Cherokee last year fishing a fall tournament. And what I saw in that lake during that time is that if you got around the right sized bait fish, you started to get around the bass. You could be out in almost anywhere on the lake, and you're gonna be around a lot of 1 inch, 2 inch sized threadfin shad. But if you got into certain creek arms in certain areas, you would see more of those 3-inch, 4-inch, 5-inch threadfin shad, and you even saw some of those bigger gizzard shad. When you found those bigger bait fish, that is typically where I started to catch bass. And not only bass, I would start to catch bigger bass in those areas. So yes, bait can equal bass, but it's gotta be the right bait. And again, just because you find bait doesn't mean that you're always going to find bass. You know, to me, the best thing that you can do when it comes to fall fishing is cover a lot of water, especially in that early to mid fall time. You want to fish everything. You don't want to get too keyed in onto one particular type of pattern, even one particular type of bait. I usually have 4 or 5 baits that I really like to fish during the fall, but I'm not going to just throw one. It's really going to be a junk fishing deal. And even if I catch a bass on a spinner bait over here, doesn't mean I'm going to catch a fish on a spinner bait over here. It might be a buzz bait over there. But really the biggest thing that you can do is just not get too keyed in to where you caught a bass. You might catch one off a stump that's on a point. You might go around the point and there's a dock. You catch one actually on one of the dock pilings. You get to the back of the creek. You catch one on a buzz bait in the back of the creek. You come back out. You catch one on a riprap bank. That is what early fall and kind of that mid fall time frame really look like a lot of times when I'm out there bass fishing. You're just catching a fish here, a fish there. Yes, every now and then you will run into schools of fish. You might run into a school of fish on one dock, or a school of fish on a point, or a school of fish in the back of a pocket, but that doesn't happen all the time. And typically what happens for me is I see more schools of fish later into fall. When that water temperature gets below 60 degrees, when it's in the 50s and even in the high 40s, that's when I start to see fish really start to school up. And so that is when, if I catch one, I'm gonna keep casting around in that area. Now, the second big misconception that you hear a lot, and you hear this a lot in bass fishing in general, but definitely in the fall, is match the hatch, right? Match the hatch. That's what we're all taught, is match the hatch, which basically means you want to match your lure to what the bass are feeding on. So something that I've seen in the fall, and this isn't always true, but there's definitely been times where it's made a huge difference, is that you actually want to mismatch the hatch, if that makes sense. So the big thing here that I'm going to talk about is the color of your lure. And so what I have seen is that, you know, we tend to throw a lot of white and bait fish style baits during the fall. And I'm gonna try to say this in the right way, because I'm sure I'm gonna get blown up in the comments, but yes, you're gonna catch fish in that, but sometimes being a little bit different. For instance, if you're throwing a square bill crankbait, you know, everyone thinks, hey, there's shad all over the place. Let's just throw that sexy shad color because it looks exactly like the bait fish. And I get that, and you're gonna catch some fish that way, but I have seen sometimes we're actually throwing something different. For instance, maybe it's a black back and chartreuse square bill. If you throw a bait like that, it actually kind of stands out from the crowd, right? There's bait fish everywhere during this time of the year. They're everywhere. They're all over the place. They're all the same size. So if your crankbait looks exactly like that bait fish, it might just get kind of lost in all the bait fish. So if you throw a chartreuse blackback crankbait, that actually might start to be better and catch you more fish because it stands out. And chartreuse blackback is really kind of on the opposite side of the spectrum. You know, sometimes I kind of like to go to some of those fainter yellow, fainter chartreuse colors, just a little bit off-white colors, because again, I'm just trying to stand out a little bit from all the bait fish that are in that area. And sometimes that actually helps me to get more bites, is standing out instead of really matching, being perfectly like those little shad, because they're just everywhere. Another thing when it comes to matching the hatches, you know, there's so many of those little tiny bait fish around that you think that a spinner bait with smaller blades might work really well. And again, I'm sure you would catch some on that, but I've actually found that using a spinnerbait with a little bit bigger blades during the fall and in that cooler water actually is going to help yield you better results. You're going to catch more fish, you're going to catch bigger fish. I really hope that you guys understand what I mean about the bait not always equaling the bass, and also that you shouldn't always match the hatch. But then again, these are my experiences, and you may have experienced something completely different at your lake or in your body of water. So if you guys have experienced something different, then definitely let me know down in the comments. Now, one of my favorite lures to fish during the fall is a buzzbait. A buzzbait catches really big bass and it can catch a lot of bass. If you guys want to see a video that I did about fall buzzbait fishing, you can click this video right here. If you guys have experienced some different things out on the water, please comment them below. Like this video and subscribe. I'll see you guys in the next video.